Welcome to the Daily Boogie.
A bit of white privilege. It's time to check your privilege, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Privilege Checking Central. Let's go. Ray Lee parent. I believe that's how you pronounce it in North Carolina. I could be mistaken. Ray Lee. Ray Lee parent upset about white privilege paper sent home with student. The mother of a second grader at Hunter Magnet Elementary in Rayleigh is upset about a sheet that explained white privilege was sent home with her child. Amber Pabin said the two-sided sheet was in his folder when he came home last month. On one side, it discusses white representation in government, the military, media and education. On the other, it lists examples of white privilege in society. Raleigh. That sounds more like it. Raleigh. I think the message itself is inappropriate because, yes, there is racism out there and they need to learn about it. But let the parents do that, Parbin said, because like I said, if she's teaching him the way she knows, it could be completely different from the way I know. And me being part of the black community, I know different from how the white community sees it. I know different. I know different than the white peoples because I'm black. Parman said she believes the content is also not proper for such a young child. He's 8 years old. What does he need to know about racism or white privilege? She asked. Let's have a little look-see here from the Raleigh.
Yeah, Steve, this is an
News.
11-step guide sent by the school's PTA with parents receiving one step each week. But one parent we spoke with said they only receive step 3, which focuses on white privilege.
Or medical help. My race will not work against.
It's a difficult, often uncomfortable topic to discuss, regardless of someone's age. For Amber Paban, the mother of a Hunter Elementary second grader, it's a subject she didn't expect to have to address so soon.
He's 8 years old. What does he need to know about racism or white privilege?
Paban is
well, we need to teach him nice and young so he doesn't grow up to be a patriarchal monster, I'm afraid, Amber. Amber appears like a nice lady, a concerned parent. You know, and she's well within her right to question these things for 8-year-olds, but I'm afraid we do need to march the 8-year-olds in as soon as possible, sit them down for their white privilege entrainment. It is only with the supple minds of the young, ladies and gentlemen, can we hope to build a utopia on their backs, you know, in about 15 or 20 years from now. That's progress, baby.
referring to this sheet sent home with her son last month. On one side includes statistics about white representation in government, the military.
Every 8-year-old understands stats. People who decide which TV shows we see, 93% white. See, but people will, you know, if you're a little bit older than 8 years old, or perhaps not an adult, would you say utopian progressive, a far left-winger, you would understand that people who decide which TV shows we see, they might well be 93% white, but I would suggest a good chunk of that 93% would be self-hating white people who think that white people are evil. And, you know, need to doing everything they can to diminish the quote-unquote white power on television. How about an ideology privilege test? Can we send that home? Can we send that home with the kiddies? People who decide which news is covered. 85% white, yes, but perhaps 75 to 80% liberal as well. People who decide which music is produced, overwhelmingly liberal. Teachers, 83% white, probably 90% liberal. Full-time college professors, 84% white, probably 85% liberal. Owners of men's pro football teams. That's an interesting one just to lump in at the end. Who owns the football teams? Well, that's very relevant. That's relevant. Anyway, carry on.
Media and the classroom. On the other, it lists examples of white privilege in society.
My son comes home to me and asks me, Mommy, are white people better than me?
That jarring question still leaves Paban emotional. It's something she feels shouldn't be of concern to an 8-year-old.
He's not looking at the color of your skin. He's not looking at your hair, your eye color, what you're wearing. No, he wants to play with you because that's what children do. They play with each other.
A district spokesperson tells us this information is sent to parents by the school's PTA and is not part of the in-class curriculum. Off camera, multiple members of the PTA
Sent home by the PTA, so it's other concerned parents. Isn't that lovely to know? Isn't it nice to know that the PTA, the Parents and Teachers Association, ladies and gentlemen, is getting together in their spare time and figuring out how best to educate your children outside of the school curriculum? That's right. The school actually came out and said, this is not part of the school curriculum. Like, that's a good thing. Oh, no. This was from the PTA. The school didn't supervise this at all. No. We just sent your kids home with white privilege entrainment documents. Like, that happened, but that wasn't us. That didn't come from any kind of educational facility. That was just the teachers and parents in their own time outside of school jurisdiction deciding to educate your kids. Isn't that better? Isn't it nice to know that people are taking this time out of their day to educate your children outside of school business? That's fantastic. It's fantastic. We should invite them over for dinner. What do you think of my son's meal? Should we have more vegetables? Is he having too much butter? Why stop at white privilege?
PTA say it's part of an 11-step guide aimed at parents, focusing on racial equity in society. While Paban says she only received Step 3, which focuses on white privilege, the PTA notes that steps are sent home weekly, emailed to parents, and posted to the PTA Facebook page.
I'm very happy that this... Well, it's not the school. We've got to stop saying the school. I'm very happy that the Hunter Elementary PTA is sending home weekly updates. They're very committed to this white privilege crusade.
On the top of the sheet is a brief letter explaining the program to parents. It notes in part that the initiative is, quote, focusing on generating awareness and empathy to create a safe and equitable Hunter community. Other steps include explore a case study of racism, the criminal justice system, and ways to fight and heal racism.
Parents are given the option to opt out of such readings, which Paban has since.
Suggestions on how to fight and heal racism. Racism is a wounded animal. After we fight it, then we must heal it.
Done. The PTA says overall they've received overwhelmingly positive feedback on the initiative.
Yeah.
We have included a link to all 11 steps on this story at our website at abc11.com. Live from Hunter Elementary, I'm Michael Perchik, ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks for that, Mr. Perchik. Well, I'm obviously
well, a public employee was on the job and found money.
I'm obviously a very ignorant, privileged white person myself. I wanted to learn more about white privilege, so I went to the only place I know the smartest people on the face of the earth, Asians.
Let's talk about white people.
Yay.
Since the Mayflower, it's been much better to be white in the U.S. than anything else. But whiteness is tricky. Not all white people were created equal. White people with power have had to reconstruct the definition of whiteness over time. And luckily they can do that because whiteness is...
The white people in power, they've had to reconstruct the definition of whiteness repeatedly over time. I didn't see. We see here that looks like Benjamin Franklin to me with those glasses he's famous for, and a couple other of the lads, the rebellious lads, obviously sitting down to discuss matters of liberty, taxation, incoming threats from the tyranny of the British government, and reconstructing whiteness. I'm sure that was high on the agenda for the white men in power at their time. If you don't agree with that, then you are a white privileged devil, yes. I mean, look at Benjamin Franklin's haircut. It looks devilish to me. It's like, see, if those two strands, if those two locks were going up instead of down, he would look like a devil. If only we had hair gel back in the day. But yeah, I'm sure these guys are discussing how best to reconstruct white privilege. I also found interesting, straight off the bat, since the Mayflower, I believe the comment was...
Not all white people were created equal. White people with power have had to reconstruct the definition of white...
I think it was a bit earlier. No need to hear it again. Since the Mayflower, it's been better to be white. Didn't like 60-70% of the people from the Mayflower and like the following few years basically die of disease and starvation? Like, wasn't there only a few of them left by the time they actually grew enough to eat and survive? Am I mistaken? Since the Mayflower arrived, it's been pretty good to be white. Well, except if you were in those famine, gonorrhea, syphilis years. Except for that. And except if you were one of the ones who was being religiously persecuted in the UK and had to pack up all your shit and get on the Mayflower and leave in the first place. It wasn't really good to be... Maybe that was, you know, Puritan privilege back in the day. I'm not sure, but this is why we're watching, to be educated.
Whiteness over time. And luckily they can do that because whiteness is just something made up and used as a tool to preserve power. For instance, in the 17th...
Whiteness is just something made up and used as a tool to preserve power. It's funny because on the one hand, if you're white, you'll be accused of not understanding privilege because you've never had to question privilege, because privilege is very real, but it's invisible to you as a white person. By the same token, it's just something that's made up and used to keep you in power. So it's invisible, it's made up, it's real, and it keeps you in power. It sounds like the Force. To use another Star Wars analogy, it's like the Force. Use the Force. You know, Han Solo strutting through, he's like, don't go in for all that Force baloney, kid. You just need a good blaster at your side. Maybe he was like the Redcoats. There's no privilege. And the Jedi, on the other hand, use their Jedi privilege to keep themselves in power. And the Sith are the ultimate SJWs, destroying the white privilege system, perhaps.
18th century, indentured servants and slaves in Virginia joined together to fight against the ruling class in Bacon's rebellion. At that time, poor white and black people were more or less considered and treated the same, which was badly. They ended up losing that battle, but the elites realized just how dangerous unity was among the lower classes. They decided it was better to divide them, allowing poor white people to identify with the economic elites based on race, rather than with black people over class issues. White indentured servants were given the rights to property and to own guns, and they were charged with policing the plantations. This, along with establishing harsh slave codes, divided the classes along racial lines.
Okay.
Virginia was the first state to establish a comprehensive slave code, and it served as a model for other states in the following years.
So she did say since the Mayflower, it was pretty good to be a white. I guess until the white guys got houses and guns. So, you know, just a little idiosyncrasy there.
This reinforced this idea of an other, a natural enemy to whites who were made to believe their whiteness was the norm and everyone else was someone to be suspicious of.
They hate white people because white people are successful and they're not.
It's this idea that white is right and other cultures are inherently wrong that's carried through our nation's histough throughout waves of immigration in the late 19th and early 20th century.
See how she very cleverly there switches between white and culture? Did you notice that? I'm going to play it one more time for the slow people.
White is right and other cultures are inherently wrong.
You see, white is right and other cultures are wrong. Now, I think if you come from a European heritage and you have an extended history in that land and with the language, the religion, and yes, indeed, the culture, which stretches back thousands upon thousands of years, I think you are well placed to objectively and honestly and rationally compare your culture with other cultures around the world. Of course, if you do go to Europe, according to lovely white privilege explainers like this non-white person, who better to explain white privilege than anybody except a white person? If you ask lovely wisdom tellers like this young lady, then they will say white is a culture. Which she just did. White is right, other cultures are wrong. Now, you could spend a day on a fast train and go through a dozen cultures in Europe. All of them different. Different languages, different customs, different traditions, different religions. No. That's just white. Oh, okay. That's white culture. See the lack of diversity when you can go through a dozen different countries with a dozen different cultures. Blondes, brunettes, redhead, blue eyes, brown eyes, green eyes, lighter skin, darker skin. Different traditions. The lot. I mean, what a lack of diversity there is in this white culture. So she very cleverly says, well, see, this idea came up where white is right and the other cultures are wrong. So now, if you take your culture, which you may or may not like, but that's up to you, that's a decision for you, and you're more than welcome to it. If you say that your culture has aspects that you objectively, comparably adjudge as better than other ones in other parts of the world, without even mentioning race, guess what? You're now a racist. Just a quick little sleight of hand that people like to do. So you should be aware of it. Because they'll say that white is a culture now. White isn't even a race, really. Because there are all different kinds of white races. For example, there's the Anglo-Saxons, the Celts, the Aryans, the Slavs. They're all white. They're different races. But let's just label them all up as one group, the white culture. Because we don't want to make things too complicated for the 8-year-olds when we send them home with this material that we come up with in the PTA meetings.
That's carried through our nation's history, throughout waves of immigration in the late 19th and early 20th century until today.
Where did any other subgroup of people contribute more to civilization?
Than white people?
Than Western civilization itself, that's rooted in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and the United States of America.
That's a good question, actually. Let's hear the triggering moment one more time. Look at that look. Aye? Aye? I just happen to be speaking English now, wearing Western clothes, but I refute that. I mean, look at this Asian language here, which I can't read. Look at the black president. Yes, the last 8 years of Obama is going to overturn 5,000 years of philosophy and scientific development. Let's hear it one more time. I'm not picking sides here. I'm just learning like everybody else. I'm very humble and an astute learner of white privilege wisdom. She doesn't think it's a good question, says Gimme.
Where did any other subgroup of people contribute more to civilization?
Than white people?
Than Western civilization itself, that's rooted in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and the United States of America.
Okay. But
Caesar
there was a
Chavez.
time
Okay, that's
Irish,
the answer.
Italians, Jews, Eastern Europe.
There's your rebuttal, bigot. Who has contributed more? Well, listen to this.
America.
Okay.
There you go. Oh, I'm glad we got that sorted out. We've got the Great Wall of China, some pyramids. It looks like Japanese writing, Caesar Chavez, and Barack Obama. Happy days. argument that is now debunked. We have debunked that bigot. Thank God. It's getting a little awkward.
But there was a time when Irish, Italians, Jews, Eastern Europeans, they all weren't considered white. In fact, the Irish were commonly compared to blacks when they first came to the US and even lived and worked side by side with each other. But you had to earn your white card and it wasn't easy. Over time, the Irish, along with Germans, Italians, and other Europeans...
Kujo says, cute popping noise refutes all. I agree. I'm going to make it my ringtone.
have been folded into this idea of whiteness, which is super
Mystery
helpful,
solved.
since the Naturalization Act of 1790 restricted naturalization to free white persons.
Oh, he got wrecked.
When huge numbers of immigrants were coming to the U.S. at the turn of the 20th century, resources and jobs were scarce. European immigrants, like many of the Irish, locked down the cheapest and most menial jobs.
Look at all this white privilege here.
They rose up by the time labor unions were forming and managed to keep black workers from joining. They also actively fought against the abolitionist movement. Now, obviously, there were exceptions to the rule, and no one label can describe an entire group of people. But for the most part, each group was willing to throw other groups under the bus to climb the social ladder. So
we just said white is right versus all other cultures. But we can't put everybody in the same group. You're literally doing that by saying white is a race and a culture. Where's my popping sound when I need it? Okay. I've got to meme that.
as America kept expanding, the definition of whiteness had to expand. And as a card-carrying white person, you get all the privileges it entails, from better employment opportunities, access to higher education, and, you know, avoiding that pesky police brutality thing.
Look at all the benefits you get with a white card. It's wrong to lump people into see, this is the other thing too. They'll say there's more white trash, like poverty white people in America than there is other races. They'll say that to you. At the same time, they'll say you get all the benefits. All this cash rolling in.
Thing. Donald Trump became the Republican nominee for president based largely on a platform of keeping out Mexicans and Muslims. And instead of the poor and working class uniting, racial tension and xenophobia distract us from a very real division. Money.
Gotcha. Capitalism is to blame. Yes. Debunked. Ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't the workers, it wasn't the blue-collar workers that voted for Donald Trump. No. Forget about what you heard about the Rust Belt states and people losing manufacturing jobs. Forget about all that. Didn't happen. Nope. It was the xenophobes. It was the xenophobes who voted in Donald Trump. Why? Because capitalism. I don't know about you, but this is incredibly enlightening.
The haves and the have-nots,
The have-nots.
policies that strengthen the security of the 1%. But as the country becomes browner and browner, the idea that white folks are naturally superior to non-white folks is going to sound increasingly ridiculous.
That's fantastic. Yep. White folks increasingly ridiculous if they believe they're better than anybody else. At the same time, they are privileged. They're privileged, but they shouldn't be, I think, because capitalism, xenophobia, racism, etc. So the idea that white people are superior, i.e. white privilege, that's going to sound pretty ridiculous as the country gets browner and browner. Because remember, it's just made up. It's not a real thing. It just keeps white people in power. You see, that's the other thing too. White privilege is so much a problem. It's, you know, because it's only a made up thing to keep white people in power. Remember that. That's why the country is turning brown. Because white privilege exists to keep white people in power. The white guys are ruling over everyone with an iron fist. At the same time, that they're losing power. I don't know. I don't know.